Okay, well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marci Nettles, and I am your host. And I am so excited to be with you again today to be able to bring another amazing guest with a phenomenal story of being in some pretty dark spots, maybe even wading in a little bit of poop, um, to a really victorious spot in her life now. My guest today, and by the way, the reason why I do these stories is because I truly believe that stories save lives. And if we can learn from somebody else's difficulty in their life, then maybe us getting out of it will be a little bit easier if we're willing to learn from someone else's journey. So, Randi is my guest today. I'm so excited to have her here with me today. She is a mental health advocate, author, and YouTuber. She started writing at 14 years old as a coping strategy for her depression. 20 years later, she is now a mom, grandma, and thriving creative individual. So I am so excited to be able to welcome you here to the Your Blank What Now podcast. Thanks for being here, Randi.
Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. And so I just have to be totally transparent and honest here right today. So before we got started, I was like so excited because if we were going to be doing something new, we were going to be recording in all the places that we normally record, but then I was going to go live on YouTube. And when I hit the button, it says you don't have permission. So we'll be doing that next time.
I was so excited to be the first with
I
you.
know, I know, I know. But we'll have to figure out something else that you can be the first with me at. Okay, we'll figure something out. But I appreciate you being willing to be that first for me. So we decided together that the title of your episode is going to be You're Fighting Cancer and Your Son is Suicidal. What now? Oh my goodness, that's going to be quite the conversation we're going to be having. But before we get into that, would you mind starting out with sharing more with the What Now tribe about who Randi is and what your life was really like before your diagnosis?
Sure. I am a very crazy individual. I like to say that. Very quirky. So I have two kids. I got a grandbaby. I have three dogs and four cats. And I've been with my husband now 17. I've done a lot of different things. I was on the Canadian kickboxing team at one point, Canadian national champ in 2015. So just a lot of different things. I got my scuba diver's license at one point, like just lots of fun stuff. Which then leads into the question of what was it like beforehand? Well, my cat just opened the closet door. Beforehand, I was doing all of those things. I was, being able to go out and do kind of lots of whatever I wanted physically. Um, and then afterwards, when I got that diagnosis, and I'm sure we'll get into this, I didn't really have time to process it at the time because there was so much else going on. Afterwards, though, and so the type of cancer I had was cervical. So they had to take out all the bits,
Mhm.
which now that I've processed it all, I say, hey, if I was going to have cancer, at least I have one with that now is I don't have that womanly thing. Eh,
Right.
Think of the positives. But afterwards, when things kind of calmed down and I was able to start processing it, I was like, oh my God, I have died. What? No, what? Um,
So for a second there, I kind of lost you just a little bit. What was the last little bit that you said?
Oh, I just said it's been interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that's like a small way of describing that, right? I mean,
Exactly.
I mean, you were so active and you were I mean, obviously being a champion kickboxer, that's a really big deal. That takes a lot from your body. And
Mhm.
so what was it like being diagnosed with cancer and really not being able to make sense of it?
So, I mean, what happened first, okay, so for all the women listening, always go and get your, checkups when you're supposed to, because of all the stuff that was going on in my life, I kinda put it off about a year, and so when I first went, it was my family doctor is the one that, did the pap test, and I went back in, and he said, "There's abnormal cells." I was like, "Okay." So he sent me to a gynecologist, they did, like a little biopsy of an area. They said, okay, it's pre-cancer, so we just need to take out the bad area. So, okay, that's doable, that's fine. So I had surgery, they took out that one part. When they take that part out, they send it for more testing just to I have lipstick on my teeth. Just to make sure though that nothing else is going wrong, right? Like it hasn't spread anywhere. And so then after my first surgery, they said, "Okay, I'll see you in 8 weeks." They called me a week later and said, "I need you to come in right now." Oh, well, this can't be good. Um, my cat is really like bugging me in the I just bugged her. So I went in, and they just had to like fit me into that day. And so I waited for a very long time at the office, which I didn't normally have to do while I was there. Go into the room after waiting for the doctor to come in. As soon as he walks in, the look on his face, I knew what he was gonna say. I knew it. And silly me at the time, I'm like, "I don't need anybody to come with me. It's, whatever." I probably should have had somebody go with me because it was a lot more emotional than I thought it was gonna be. So he comes in, and the first thing he says was, "You already have kids, right?" I said, "Yep, I do." He goes, "Were you planning to have any more?" I said, "No, no." In fact, my husband had had a vasectomy 2 years prior, I wanna say. Um, so our ongoing joke now, of course, is that we're super safe. Um,
For sure.
but even though we had already decided not to have kids, the idea that I couldn't anymore, not that I wanted to, but I couldn't, the choice was now taken, that actually was really hard to deal with. Um, because now, even not that I had ever really wanted to be a surrogate, but I couldn't be one anymore. It was just something I didn't have the choice to make on my own. It was taken from me. So that was pretty a really weird feeling to, you know, have something taken from you that I never really would have thought of doing anyways, or, we had already finished having kids, but having it ripped from you is just is very emotional. Um I don't even remember your original question now, but, so he told me that, and, so I went in my car, I called my husband, I was like, "This is what he said." My husband was like, "Okay, what do we gotta do?" And I said, "Well, I have to have a hysterectomy." He goes, "Okay." And in the office, I kept saying, "Okay, so take it. I don't need it. Just take it," right? Like, because my brain was just in, "Oh my goodness, this is what is going on right now. Okay, I don't need these parts. You can take them, just make me better." And he goes, "Well, you have to finish healing from this last surgery before you can have another one." Oh, yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. So I had to wait about, I think it was about 8 weeks or whatever. I have the hysterectomy. Um, and then I at home I'm not feeling great. I'm like, "No, it's fine. I'm fine. It's just fine." I've never seen him so scared in his life. He took me back to the hospital. I had an infection. And so I almost died from that. So if the cancer wasn't taking me out, the infection was. So I stayed overnight in the hospital. I had a whole bunch of IVs and blood drawn, and it was awful because I had very little fluid. So trying to find blood was not an easy task. And then I had to have ultrasounds, and they were just checking everything, which I mean was good, but it was exhausting. So exhausting. So all through that, I remember your original question now. So all through that, I was just in survival mode. It was just tell me what I need to do. I'm going to go do it. I'm not processing what's happening because not only am I just going through the motions of what I have to do, what doctor I have to go to, what appointment I need to go to, I'm also dealing with my kid, as the title of the episode says, dealing with my kid being suicidal and taking him in and out of the hospital into the mental health ward and a treatment place so he can get help. So my health was not a thought, it was just a task to do, whereas what I was focusing on was all the stuff I needed to do for him.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you had so much going on there. And because you were a fighter before this happened. And so automatically you're going to go into that survival mode and I'm going to
Mhm.
fight and I'm going to be fine and this is going to work out. You're just going to do whatever you have to do, but in reality you're in a little bit of shock
Yeah.
and not understanding really what entirely is going on. Not to mention, when you were talking about losing that choice of, so what if we did decide to have another baby down the road? We can't do that now.
Yeah.
Even though in reality, it probably wasn't something you were going to do anyway, but It was really kind of, do you think it was like losing control a little bit?
Yeah, that is a good way to put it.
Yeah. So have you has that been something that has pretty much been part of your life, the majority of your life is being the one that was in control?
Um, yes and no. So as a teenager, very much no because of the my household situation or whatever. But I think because of that, as an adult, I like to be in control. And
Oh,
now my adult self isn't being allowed to be in control.
I got you. Okay, so you just kind of opened the door for me a little bit. So tell me about your home life when you were a teenager. That
Yeah,
of
good times, good times. I'm lying, they weren't. So as a teenager, from my graduation of grade 8 to when I started in high school in grade 9, my mom got married. At that time, my brother was actually in jail because my brother was addicted to drugs and he was in and out of jail. The person my mom got married to ended up being an alcoholic. And so I never knew when I would come home from school, I never knew who it was that I would walk in the house and see or meet. And I'm not talking strangers, I'm talking personalities. Was it going to be the stepdad that was nice, or was it going to be the one that's yelling and screaming about I don't even know what? Um, so it was pretty scary situation. And at that time, you don't talk about it. Shh. It's happening in your house. Shh. Now I tell everybody. But because of that whole you don't tell people, I didn't know that there was help out there. I didn't know that this was not normal. I didn't know that I there was an escape. Like I didn't know anything other than I have a bedroom and I'm going to shut my door and I'm going to try and block out all the rest of it.
yeah. Yeah, and so when you're in that circumstance of having no control, a lot of the times you build up those walls that then down the road you
Mhm.
become the controller. So,
Yes,
yeah, so
exactly.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, totally get it, totally get it. So, being now this personality that likes to have a little bit of control and being told that you no longer have that, I can only imagine the difficulty and what a mental game, mental mind.
Poop.
I don't want to say yes, exactly. I don't want to say some of those words that keep coming to mind to say, but I don't want to say them. But everybody gets the drift, right? And so, how did you handle like that mental health aspect of this?
Poorly. Very poorly.
Most of us do when we're in the mess.
Yeah, so, because I was in survival mode, honestly, I don't remember what I felt like, which sounds really strange to say out loud, but I was a robot. I had a checklist of what needed to be done, and that's what was gonna get done, and don't get in my way because then you'd be yelled at. Short-tempered, is definitely something that was going on a lot then. Um, but it was yeah, it was so much just, "This needs to be done, that needs to be done. When am I gonna even go to work?" 'Cause I was working at the time. I actually had I actually had left my job and started my own personal training business just to find out I had cancer. So that was also another kick in the butt to try and balance starting a business with having to have surgery and everything else that goes along with it. It was very difficult and not a thriving business because I didn't have time for that.
Right. No, it was time that you had to focus on yourself. And as you've already mentioned, your son. So, how old was your son at this point when you now have been diagnosed with cancer? You've had two surgeries and a major infection.
Yes.
And so you've got this going on personally. How old was your son at this point? And will you please share deeper in what was going on with him and his mental health and what led to
Yeah.
it?
So he would have been the summer before grade 7, so I wanna say 11, 12, something like that. He's now 17 to give you some perspective. And so at that time and he had been dealing with mental health his whole life. I think his very first panic attack, he was like 4. We took him to the emerge because we're like, "What is happening right now?" We thought I don't even know what I thought. I just knew something was wrong. And so eventually learned it's a panic attack and he has anxiety disorder. And then when he was 8, he was finally diagnosed with autism. And he would have violent meltdowns. And for those that don't know much about autism, a very, very, very brief description of what I'm talking about when I say meltdown is picture a temper tantrum because you have said, no, you can't have that candy bar. So the child is yelling and screaming and throwing a fit. You know why they're throwing the fit, but they are throwing this fit. A meltdown is they're yelling and screaming and throwing a fit. However, you don't know why. You didn't tell them no. You have no idea why. And eventually, over many years of therapy with him, we've learned, it's sensory overload. There would be too many people in the room, or there would be too many tasks asked of him. The noise was too loud. The lights were too bright. But at the time, you're like, what the heck is happening? This looks like a temper tantrum, but I didn't say anything, so this is not a temper tantrum. Um, that's my very simplistic way of explaining it. And when he would have meltdowns, and kids range in how they have them, but when he would have a meltdown, they would be very violent. There would be kicking, there would be punching. I definitely got a few bruises over the years. As he got bigger, we would have to call 911 and get them to help. Because there was no, like, you had to protect yourself, but you also, I wanted to protect him from hurting himself. And so, part of some of those meltdowns was also that he was hating himself. He was very depressed and didn't know how to deal with those feelings and those emotions. And so he had tried multiple times, like, honestly, I don't know how many times because it was that many times, to try and kill himself. Can I say
Yeah, you
that?
can.
And so there'd be times when he would cut himself. Okay, so we got a safe. Now the knives are put away. Now he's taking overdosing on pills. Great. Okay, the pills are now in the safe. Now he's finding a belt to wrap around his neck and try to hang himself. A cord. Like, there's only so many things that you can do as a safety precaution to put things away out of reach when it becomes, I would have to literally take everything out of your room, everything out of the house, be with you 24/7. So it was so stressful. And I was with him majority of the time. That is one of the big reasons that I quit working outside of the home, was because he needed so much more attention. Um, we'd be getting calls from the school. Okay, you got to come pick him up. You got to come pick him up. So, um, at that time, we would have to call, like I said, the ambulance, and they would take him to the hospital. They would assess him in the little mental health ward, and then they usually would admit him, and he'd be taken to the other hospital, the children's mental health hospital, which is about, I'm going to say, about an hour from my house. And so almost every day we'd be going up to that hospital to visit him and then coming back home, and it was exhausting. So not only am I going, okay, what doctor's appointments do I have right now? I'm also going, okay, what time's visiting hours? I got to get up there. Oh, what do I need to bring him today? Oh, he needs some fresh underwear this time. Like, it was a heck of a lot.
Yeah, what a balancing act that you had going on. Not to mention, I mean, you personally with what you had, I mean, removed, obviously, creates different issues for females as well. And so here you are dealing with everything that goes along with your cancer, your process of healing, and seeing your son so desperately needing help and needing really his mom, right? Even though,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard sometimes. I mean, because obviously when he was having those, like you said, it's like a tantrum on steroids, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and you don't know why. You can't reason. They don't reason, right? Autistic children don't have that same ability to reason. And so when you're going through all of this yourself, as a parent, how was it feeling like you really weren't able to do and be what your son needed at that point?
Oh, it felt like crap. That, in one word, that is what it feels like, but maybe a more severe word.
Yeah.
Um, it was absolutely awful. So not only am I broken, I'm a broken person because my body wants to kill itself. I'm a horrible mother, which also means that I'm horrible at my job, which also means that I'm a horrible wife and a horrible friend. And I also have depression. So having all of that happen at that time as well, I was off my antidepressants. And so thinking I can't help him made me feel like, well, maybe he'd be better off without me because maybe I'm the issue now. It's not a logical thing to think at all. But the thing about mental health is it's not logical.
No, no, there's a reason why it's called mental health, and really it should be mental unhealth. I don't know,
Yes,
something.
I mental illness, that's what
There
I
you
I
go,
am
there you go, that's
trying
it.
to change my lingo, but it is hard when it's so ingrained.
Yeah, and you know, and that right there too. I mean, because over time, it's really changed quite a bit. Because back, I mean, when I was younger, it's like mental health was never even talked about
Like I said,
at all.
"Shh, it's
Yeah,
happening at home, shh."
voodoo, right? Yeah, it's embarrassing. It's something, it's the stigma that is put on
Mhm.
mental health. And yet, hopefully, we've come a distance since then. I know that there are more treatments, more availability for help, but I still think that we're falling short
Yeah,
in what is needed and necessary for people
yeah,
that struggle with mental health. I mean, myself, I've had 4 suicide attempts myself. You know,
yeah,
back when I lost my identity, my whole life changed. I was on a lot of prescription medication. I had surgeries and all that kind of stuff that alters your mindset, alters your body, alters all the hormones going on throughout your body and your brain. And you feel like there's not anything better for you, right?
yep,
And yet, you know, there
yeah,
is, because every moment, the reason why we have the word moment is because it's just a small moment in time, a small speck of time that leads to another moment. And that
yes,
next moment will change, just like in seasons. You know, we have winter, which can be horrific for some people, but thankfully we have spring. And sometimes when we're having those mental health problems, we forget that.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what lessons did you learn as you were going through all this chaos that you had going on in your life? What did
Oof.
you learn through it all?
Um, well, the biggest lesson would be don't put off your checkups, go regularly. But other ones would be take time, take a breath, ask for help. Um, you're not broken even if, you have cancer, you have mental illness. You're not broken, you're just got something going on. Um, those are the biggest lessons. And that whole reaching for help thing can come in so many different forms. It can come by giving yourself time to process, which I definitely should have. It could be spending time with family, with friends. It could be finding a professional to talk to. Like there's so many different ways that you can ask for help or seek help. It doesn't always have to be straight to a professional, but I think oftentimes when we say go get help, we think, "Oh, it's professional. I can't afford them." And I mean, they could be quite pricey. Um, but that's why I always like to say it can be something different. It can be taking care of yourself, it can be hanging out with your animals, friends, family, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different avenues to reach for and to get
Yeah.
some assistance, right? And yet, how easy was it for you to do that? What was
Oh, I'm
asking
not
for
saying it's
help?
easy.
What was asking for help like for you?
Oh, definitely not saying it's easy. It depends which help for, depending on how easy it would be. So, um, for my mental illness, it was very difficult because at that time I'm like, I'm all better from depression. I don't need my medication. So to then backtrack and say, oh wait, no, still definitely have depression and still should be on them. I kept that a big giant secret for probably another 2 years and just suffered in silence, which is not a good thing. But asking for help when my kid needed it, I had no problem with that. I was like, "Hey, who do I need to talk to because this is not okay. We need to fix this." So like I said, there's different kinds of help and there's different times when you feel comfortable asking for help.
Oh, I agree 100%. So, why do you think it was so much easier asking for help for your son than for yourself?
I think because as a parent, you wanna do whatever possible you can for them, and it wasn't my failure. It would be my failure if I didn't ask for help, but it's not my failure that he needs help. As a parent, I need to just get him what he needs. But for me to ask for help for myself, it means I'm a failure.
Interesting. Interesting. Where in reality, that's not true at all.
Nope, not even a little bit.
No, no. But when we get into those dark spaces of our mind and we focus on that, very
Yeah,
oftentimes, those are the stories we tell.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Okay. So tell me what part courage played in your journey. And I'm like, I feel almost ridiculous even asking you that question because, oh my heck, every single step of the way it took courage from, I mean, from the very first moment. So share with us what it was like for you to be courageous.
I definitely at that time did not feel that way. Even now when people say that, because a lot of times when you say, "Oh yeah, I'm a cancer survivor," they're like, "Oh, you're so brave," or "Good for you," or whatever they say, and I'm like, thanks." Like it feels really weird. Um, and then I have to stop and go, "Oh yeah, I guess it's because I could have died, and that's why they're saying it. Oh, okay, it makes sense." But it doesn't make it feel any less weird. And so I mean, like you said, the whole time it was a type of courage that I did think was courage. It's not something I feel like when you're going through these situations, and again, survival mode, you're not thinking being brave or being strong or being courageous. You're just thinking, get to the next day, get to the next step. And so it really is a looking back and going, okay, that does take courage. It wasn't easy to ask for help. It wasn't easy to go to the doctor. It wasn't I was petrified when I went for my surgery. I had never had a big surgery like that before. I was petrified. And so that takes courage to actually show up to the appointment and let them rip parts out of you. Um, and so encourage when they're like, I need you to come back and do these follow-up things. It takes, I think, for me, it was a type of courage that had I said I was brave at the time, I would have never believed it. I would have been like, "No, this is just what has to happen." And it's not until talking to other people that I look back and go, "Wow, okay, maybe not everybody would have done it that way or would have done these things." So I guess there is some courage behind it, but to me it was simply this needs to be done, so it's gonna get done.
Yes. Okay. So that's exactly the definition of courage in my book. Because when we set up a specific definition on a word or an action and expect it to look exactly the same way every single time, we're going to be really kind of messed up and let down all of the time.
Especially when
Because,
we're talking about people.
oh my gosh, right? Right. And courage, I mean, courage doesn't look any one way. It can be dirty, it can be nasty, it can be ugly, right?
Mhm.
Courage basically is just doing something that you're scared crapless about, but you do it anyway.
Yes. And there was definitely a lot of that going on.
I'm sure. I am sure. Yeah, I cannot even imagine. I mean, I've had my own journey and yet I haven't gone down that one. And so, and especially compounded with the stressor of your son there as well. So think about it. What would be one thing if you could go back before your diagnosis and even, two different time frames, before your diagnosis and
Mhm.
even before you found out that your son was going to have this different level of struggle in his life? What would you say to yourself if you were able to go back to those two time periods in your life?
So, I'm gonna start with the one that would be farther back in time, so that would be when he got diagnosed or prior to. Um, I would say so his diagnosis was actually very helpful, and we knew that something was going on, and actually having that diagnosis was the best thing that could have happened for him. So I would have probably said to myself prior to is don't listen to the doctors, keep fighting because and don't listen to the schools. keep fighting, because it took me a long time to realize that um I actually had to change him doctors to get him proper help and proper assessments to get that diagnosis. The other doctor was just very old school in the fact that "Eh, they're just a kid." I'm like, no, that's not, no. So that was a really big thing. And I wish I would have done that sooner. And the other thing was that the school, because of the meltdowns prior to his diagnosis, they were treating him like he was a bad kid. And that wasn't the case at all. And I knew that. And I would say, no, that's not him. Something is happening. I don't know what's happening. You're telling me nothing's happening, but something is happening. And it was because there's 30 kids in the class and they're all screaming at the same time. Um, so I would have told my advice to myself back then would have been, don't let them bully you, because at least here where I am, I'm in Ontario, Canada. The school system bullies you to do what they want you to do to make their life easier. And I learned that the hard way, and it took me a lot of years to learn it. And now when I talk, I mean, he's in grade 12, he's graduating this year. Whoo. But yeah, but it wasn't until probably about grade 6, 7 that I was like, "No, I am not agreeing to this. This is not okay." Because all they were trying to do was make their life easier, not help him. Um, and then the other time period, so just before the cancer, I probably would have said to myself, "Go and get your checkup." Because then it might have, I mean, it was still caught very early on. I was very lucky I didn't have to do the radiation and chemo. But had I caught it even sooner, then it would have been that first surgery where they took out a little bit, and, I would have still had all the other parts, and not had to have a second surgery. But because I waited, it didn't work so well.
Ah, good points. Good advice to yourself for sure. And I just want to tell you one thing. Um, I know that you've told yourself in your life through all of this that you weren't a good mother. And I want to tell you that
Might have been said.
you have been a phenomenal mother. Not only have you been a phenomenal mother, but you have been a phenomenal advocate for your son, because things could be so different for him right now if he had not had you as his mother going to battle for him, knowing who he was, even though, his outward actions maybe weren't exactly what would have been what we would have liked, right?
Yeah.
But you knew his heart and you knew he was a good kid and you fought for that part of your son. And so I would just implore to you, just start telling yourself what you truly are. And that is, I am a great mom. I love my son and my son is blessed to have me.
Thank you.
There's a lot of kids out there that don't have mamas that go to battle for them like you have. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. So let's talk a little bit about mental health. And what would you share with maybe other parents that are learning that their children have suicidal tendencies, or maybe just learning that their child is um, on the spectrum and maybe they just don't know what to do? What type of sage advice could you give? Because you have wisdom now, because you've been through this. And that's what I want the What Now tribe to really catch from these
Yeah.
stories, is that the reason why we share them is because the people have been through the things that maybe you're going through right now. And they might have some wisdom that you can take bits and pieces from to make the next part of your journey more simple. So what would you
That's
offer?
That is a whole big question. So the very first thing that came to my mind when you were saying, what would you say to other parents about learning about mental health and such? It happens to everyone at all ages at any random time. That's a pretty big statement. But I said it before. My kid had the very first panic attack at 4 years old. And I mean, I've had people say to me, well, what does a 4-year-old have to worry about? It's not about us seeing their life as being easy, because we're comparing a 4-year-old's life to an adult life and a 4-year-old's brain to an adult brain. No, a 4-year-old's life turns out he was being relentlessly bullied. I didn't know that until he finally told me. So there's so much that we don't know as parents, even at such a young age. So it can happen at any age. And if they are talking about it, talk to them about it. Don't shut it down. Don't belittle them. Don't say, "Oh, what do you have to worry about?" Well, sometimes with and I can only speak to what I've dealt with, right? Sometimes with at least depression and anxiety, um, there is no what is the issue. It is that I answered a question wrong in class and now I feel like a giant idiot. And I think everybody laughed at me and I'm stupid and I shouldn't be here and maybe I'll just kill myself. Like it's this role that totally goes out of control. What's that saying? Making a mountain out of a molehill. Like it's just insane how crazy our brains can get. And so don't don't tell them to get over it. Don't tell them to fake it till they make it. That was what my mom always used to say, "Oh, fake it till you make it. It's fine." No, no, no. No, no. Um, and so that would be the 2 really big pieces for the mental health. For autism, I would say if you are suspecting it, then keep going back to the doctor and explaining it and doing your own research and taking notes. I have before he got the diagnosis, I had to fill about 3 notebooks full of, "This is what happened, here was his reaction, this is how it was dealt with, this is how long it went on for, this is what we've tried," and just notes and notes to try and let the doctor understand what was happening, because a lot of times, if the doctor can't go in and see it, right? Autism, mental health, any kind of invisible disability, you go into the doctor and you say, "I'm feeling this." Well, are you right now? Well, no. Well, I can't help you right now then. Right. So having all of those notes, all of that information, any letter that the school sends home, even as insignificant as it might seem, keep everything. Document everything. And that way when you go to the doctor, and you're gonna go if they end up getting diagnosed with autism or whatever, you're gonna end up going to a lot of different doctors and trying a lot of different things. Having those notes makes your life so much easier. You're not having to remember it. It's all just there in black and white, and doing it in the moment will help you to keep track of everything. And that's one of the best ways to help them is to make sure that you have all of that documentation because you never know when you're going to need it later. We went through so many different therapists, so many different doctors, and then this doctor wants to send you to that doctor, and then we even went to genetic counseling and all these different things, occupational therapists, speech therapists. They all ask the same general questions. So have your notes and you could just, here you go. Slide it over.
That is so good. That is such a great piece of advice. I mean, even if you think it's something that's really insignificant, if it's something that becomes a pattern, which means it's done more than once, right? If it's something that occurs more than one time, just start journaling and just start making notes of these little things because like you said, when you go to the doctor over and over, and new doctors, you have to provide the same information over and over and over again, and having to tell someone the same thing over and over and over again can become a job in itself and really stressful. So having it prepared, that is so good, so good. And you've had, I mean, with what you shared, the little bit that you shared about your growing up, your younger years, and you mentioned your brother and him having addictions and, so mental health has really been a part of your life, your whole life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your brother? Because I know you've written a book sharing
I
his
have.
story, and so I'd love for you to
That little
share.
red one. There it is. That's that
Oh,
one.
there it is. And by the way, guys, I will be uploading this episode to YouTube, even though I couldn't go live, but be looking forward to live YouTubes when I do these interviews coming up here in the very near future once I give myself permissions on there to go
Right?
live.
Yep,
Oh
yep.
my goodness. But yeah, so can you share more
Yeah.
about your brother, his journey, and why you wrote this book?
Yeah, so my brother was 4 years older than me, so being the younger sibling, my mom tried to shield me, keep me in a bubble. It didn't work well for her, but she tried. And so my brother, I can remember the earliest memory of me going, "What the heck are you doing?" I was probably about 10, which would have made him 14, and he was in the kitchen and he was smoking something. Didn't know what it was. I had no clue. It was some hard stuff. Now that I'm an adult, I realize what knives are used for.
Oh.
Um and he asked me, he's like, "Want to do this with me?" It's like,
And you're 10.
"No."
You're
And
10.
I'm 10. Yeah. Like, "No." And he's like, "Why? I wanna be the first person to do it with you." I'm like, "No." And to this day, I have never,
Good for you.
because of him. And that was my first memory of that, and then from there, he the Cliff's Notes version, he did not make very good friends. He was bullied a lot in school because we were poor. And he ended up meeting friends that they all did drugs, so he did drugs. He s broke into houses, he got into fights, so he was in and out of jail. Um, and I wrote the book because in wow, my brain just 2021. Yeah, 2021, he died by a drug overdose. And so something about my brother was that when he wasn't doing drugs, he was actually a really nice person and he always wanted to help everybody. I remember another time when I was probably about 16, he was about 20. Um, and he was trying really hard to get his life together. And he had literally given the shoes off of his feet to this person that didn't have shoes because he had another pair at home. So he was such a nice guy, he struggled. That mental illness was just it was a lot for him. So yeah, in 2021, he died by a drug overdose, and the book came from me going, "Well, his life can't mean nothing." He was 38? Yeah, I wanna say 38 at the time, and I just kept saying, "His life can't mean nothing, his life can't mean nothing," and I said, "Well, I'm an author and a mental health advocate. Psh, I can do this." So, it wasn't an easy book to write, that's for sure, but I think it really came across quite well. It speaks to the families of those that have an addiction because something that really I struggled with a lot, and I think my mom struggled a lot with, was the guilt of why couldn't we help him? And for anybody that has lost anyone from either a drug overdose or a suicide or anything like that, there is this guilt part of what could I have done so they wouldn't be dead right now? And the answer is nothing. That's the short answer. The long answer is in the book. I explain I explain why that's the short answer, but um you can't fix that person. They need to you can help them, you can drive them to the therapy, you can, help them get their medication, but they need to do the work and they need to be willing to do the work. So that was a really big struggle. I do talk a lot about boundaries in the book as well, because that is something else that is so important when you are dealing with somebody that has a mental illness, is that as much as I wanted to help him, I also had to protect myself and my own sanity, my own physical body, my own financials, my right, like there's other things that were in play that I needed to protect. I had a baby. So boundaries are another really big thing. And just I spend a whole big chapter too talking about the DSM-5, which is diagnostical criteria for addiction, because people that have an addiction or autism or depression or schizophrenia or any of these things, we don't wake up in the morning and go, it'd be great. Went and did drugs today. Like that's just not what happens. So I did spend some time explaining more what it is that makes that, entails addiction as a mental illness.
Oh, so good. And what a great way to memorialize your brother and really make his life mean, something more. I mean, because it was already important. It was his journey, right?
Yeah.
And he was your brother. And I know that you loved him no matter what, even though he tried to do drugs with you when you were 10. But
Yep.
there's that. But that's okay. Because a lot of the times this mental health comes from trauma and childhood trauma. And you shared that, when your mom got remarried, there was a lot of havoc in the house. And a
Mhm.
lot of the times that habit can really, especially when there's an older brother or a son, it can
Yep.
really fall hard on them. So, there's always these contributory factors, right?
Yes.
Yes. So tell us the title of the book because it's absolutely perfect.
Goodbye too soon.
Yes, absolutely. And so, What Now Tribe, you can actually go to marcinettles.com/books and find Randy's book where she shares the story of her brother, Goodbye Too Soon. So that's marcinettles.com/books. Go and get it, support Randy, but also maybe you'll learn something that can either help someone you really love and care about or someone that you know that has someone that's like that in their family. So please go and do that. So, Randy, how can our audience connect with you and follow you?
I'm everywhere. That's not true. I'm not on X. So I am on Facebook at RB Writing. I am on Instagram and TikTok at Randi-Lee Bowslaugh. All of my books are on Amazon, so you can always check me out there as well. And then my website is rbwriting.ca, Canada. Um, and um, and my YouTube channel is called The Write or Die Show, and it's all about mental health.
I love it. Okay, I'm making notes of all of this because I want to make sure everybody can get connected with you because I think you have so much to say and so much goodness that people, if they can listen and hear from it, that they can have an easier next step in their life if they choose, because that's what it comes down to, friends. What now, tribe? Comes down to you making a decision to do something different in your own life because we can't do it for you. We can give you ideas, we can give you tips, we can show the way that others have gone before you, but it comes down to you making the decision of knowing that you are worthy, that you deserve a better life, and that it is there waiting for you to grab hold of it. Absolutely. So we are blessed because Randy has offered a freebie to our listeners of her episode of her Affirm Your Day PDF. And for you to be able to claim that, just go to marcinettles.com/freebies, and I'll get that over to you so that you can claim yours and just really start claiming your own day and affirming yourself throughout the day with those amazing tools that she's offering us. So, any final words for the What Now tribe that you have for us, Randy?
I think I've said it all, but I guess I'll leave you with what I always say at the end of my show, and I think it is very um, appropriate for this episode that we've talked about, is the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly.
Amen. Amen. And the title of your episode has been You're Fighting Cancer and Your Son is Suicidal. What now? Thank you for being here with us, Randy. I appreciate you. You're fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.